should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart feel lonely and long for heaven and home? When Jesus is my portion,
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Time Bible Study. Of course, I'm having glitches again this morning. I didn't post the link to the group me page, which I'm doing right now. So bear with me just a moment. We're glad that you're here. And appreciate you joining in. I apologize for that. I was busy talking about God and Genesis, and just totally slipped my mind. So, Sister Maria, come back in and we'll get started. Today we're going to be talking about let me get this started here. It's like I've always got some button that I didn't push.
Is it a different link for them each time?
No, it's the same link. All right, here we go. Kaylee, are you in?
I'm getting back into it right now.
All right. I apologize for that. We are good now. It just dawned on me. I never posted the link to my sisters and brothers in Be Strong and Courageous, but we have it now. We're ready to go. So praise God that for technology, and we can work it all out. It just takes a minute. But thank you for being here. And today we have a difficult pronunciation. I'll just put it like that. So Kaylee thought of the idea of using Google. And here's the pronunciation of
Mephibosheth.
Mephibosheth. So for me to continue doing that throughout, we're just going to use
Mephibosheth.
Google. So enjoy it. Let's have fun, and we'll get started. So last week, we were on the Bible study and discussion of the wise women of Tikio and Abel. And I hope that you really enjoyed that study. Welcome, Zoom. Glad that you're here. This study is on Rizpah, Saul's concubine, and we're going to be in 2 Samuel still. But we are going to be done with 2 Samuel, which is exciting. So we know that Rizpah is Saul's concubine in 2 Samuel 3:7, and she's the mother of Armoni and
Mephibosheth.
And that tells us in 2 Samuel 21:8. We'll turn to the verses to read in just a moment. Last week, we left off with the Sheba's revolt against King David and the wise woman of Abel, where she threw the head of Sheba over the wall and stopped. Her gallant approach was to get the head of Sheba, throw it over the wall. She negotiated with Job, as we know, and that ended that confrontation and that siege of the city of Abel. So who is the first Mephibosheth? Who is the first one? There's actually two. So we're going to walk through the first one. so that we can get to the second one and have a better understanding before we get to Rizpah and what happened with her. So, Mephibosheth was King Saul's grandson, and his father was Jonathan, and his mother was Ohin. And I'm sorry if I'm butchering all these names today. So Mephibosheth was their disabled son. Do you remember that he had a disabled son? So Jonathan protected David from King Saul. As you know, he was the brother of King David's wife, and he protected him against King Saul. And as you recall in the previous study, Jonathan died in the battle fighting the Philistines for King David. And King David was distraught and tore his clothes over Jonathan's death. And David made a vow that he would take care of Jonathan's family. King David honored his friend Jonathan by caring for the needs of his disabled son after Jonathan died in war. So we recall Mephibosheth became disabled because his nurse was rushing to get him to safety as his father and grandfather were being killed, and she dropped him as a young child, and he became disabled in both his feet. And Mephibosheth was summoned by King David when he got older. And of course, he was fearful to go see King David because, after all, his father was killed and his grandfather was killed because of the war. But he went. So we're going to read and turn to 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 7 through 13, if you would. Like I said, there's a lot of reading today, but there's no better description or reading than reading right from the Bible. So we want to do that. We're in 2 Samuel chapter 9, 7 through 13. Don't be afraid, David said to him. This is David speaking to Mephibosheth. Don't be afraid, David said to him, for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table. Now, this is important because the king is telling him that I'm going to restore all your land that was rightfully yours before the war, and you're going to eat at my table, which is the king's table. Mephibosheth bowed down and said, what is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me? Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops, so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servant to do. So Mephibosheth ate at the David's table like one of the king's sons. Here we go. I got to use Google again. Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah, and all the members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. He was lame in both feet. So that is the first Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah, and all the members of Ziba's household were servants to Mephibosheth and took care of him, took care of his land, did all the things that King David had told him to do. All was good in the land. And Mephibosheth ate at the king's table. However, these battles just won't stop. The fighting over the power and the land is incredible. Although Mephibosheth sat at the table of David while David was gone for a while, he plotted to get back what his grandfather King Saul once had or owned. He already had it, but he's still fighting for more. He's like, King David gives him all of the things and gives it back, and yet still not enough. He wants to go fight some more. So he's starting to plot Mephibosheth, the first Mephibosheth, and he's plotting for this land and this power. It's not just about the land. He got the land already. He wants the power. Everybody's after this kingship. Everybody's after the power of being a king. So we want to turn to 2 Samuel 16, and we're going to read 1 through 4. As we're walking through 2 Samuel, we're understanding that these battles, these powers, they keep being done from one son to the next, to father to son, to friend to friend. The battles just continue to go about. And we read in 2 Samuel 16, 1 through 4. When David had gone a short distance beyond the summit, there was Ziba, the steward of Mephibosheth, waiting to meet him. He had a string of donkeys saddled and loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 cakes of raisins, 100 cakes of figs, and skins of wine. The king asked Ziba, "Why have you brought these?" Ziba answered, "The donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, the bread and fruit are for the men to eat, and the wine is to refresh those who become exhausted in the wilderness." Then the king asked, "Where is your master's grandson? Why isn't he here? Why didn't he come?" Ziba, who is a steward, who's been a servant, who's been working all this time for Mephibosheth, tells him, "He is staying in Jerusalem because he thinks today the Israelites will restore to me my grandfather's kingdom." So he's thinking that he's going to restore the kingdom and he's going to be king. He's going to fight for the kingship. Then the king said to Ziba, "All that belonged to Mephibosheth is now yours." That quick. I'm done. He's done. I'm giving it all to you now. So then King David gives Ziba all that belonged to Mephibosheth based on what he told him. When he returned to Mephibosheth, Mephibosheth explained he was betrayed and slandered, and King David split the belongings in half. He's like, "Okay, I don't know really who to believe. I don't know if you were really plotting. So we're just going to split the land in half. We're going to split all that belongs in half. Half is going to go to the servant Ziba and half to Mephibosheth. I'm done with this." You got to understand King David's thinking. He's always thinking, what is the fair way of handling the situation without getting it all into another war, which he already had all these other wars going on. So we can see where he split that land in 2 Samuel 19:29. We're still walking through 2 Samuel, but we're seeing the heart of David through this and how his decisions are made. So King David's on his way back to Jerusalem from multiple battles that he's been in, and he passes Shimei. And Shimei begins to curse him, throwing stones and dirt at King David. Why did God say David was after his own heart? David was faithful to the Lord. He was repentant when he did wrong, and he loved the Lord with all his heart. Now listen to King David's heart and mindset in this next verses. We're going to, no matter what David went through, he tried to seek the heart of God. You're going to turn to 2 Samuel 16, the same chapter we just were in, and we're going to read 11 through 13. David then said to Abishai and all his officials, My son, my own flesh and blood, is trying to kill me. So this is Absalom still out there before he died, going after, trying to kill King David. He's going through all these personal battles as well as national battles and kingdom battles. How much more then this Benjamite, which is Shimei, leave him alone, he says. Let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will look upon my misery and restore me his covenant blessing instead of his curse today. He's like, don't even stress about this guy throwing dirt and rocks and things at me. I'm not even going to be concerned about him. The Lord must have had him do it. I'm not going to concern myself. I'm just going to keep going. So David and his men continued along the road while Shimei was going along the hillside opposite him, cursing as he went and throwing stones at him and showering him with dirt. So, King David's like, never mind. Let's just go. It doesn't matter. Let him do whatever he's going to do. The king and all the people with him arrived at their destination exhausted, full of dirt, they've been on battle, so they're already wore out. And it's like, fine. Okay, let's just keep going. This whole time, Absalom, before his death, was orchestrating an army against his father, King David. He gathered the men and the troops surrounding himself to be able to attack his father and kill him and take the throne. His sons were still after his throne, even though King David had been anointed by God. During Absalom's march was when Absalom was on his mule, if you remember from the previous week, on his mule, and he got stuck in a tree. He was right with his hair. So if you remember, his hair was very, very long. He was very beautiful. So he's riding his mule to march towards King David, going to attack, and his hair gets caught in the tree and he gets hung there. And if you recall from the previous study, Job went back and killed him. So we're going to turn to 2 Samuel 18:9. We're still walking through. 2 Samuel 18 verse 32. The king asked the Cushite, is the young man Absalom safe? So he was worried about Absalom, even though Absalom was plotting and gathering army to go against him and fight him. He's still worried about his son. King David loved his sons, regardless of their actions. So the Cushite replied, may the enemies of the Lord, the king, and all who rise up to harm you be like that young man. He was okay. He was hung and he was killed, but he was still asking about him until he realized that Absalom was indeed dead. So we know the story from last week where they tore their clothes. They did all the things. He was very upset over Absalom's death as well. But David returns to Jerusalem once again. Now that is the first mess. All right, here we go. Mephibosheth. It was the first Mephibosheth. That is the first one, the one with the disabled feet, and Jonathan's son. And King David took him under his wing and replaced all of his land, but he still, regardless of sitting at the king's table, plotted against King David. Now we're introduced to Rizpah as the concubine of King Saul. It may have been in the practice in ancient Near Eastern kingdoms that you could lay claim to the throne by having sexual relations with the former king's wife or concubine. I didn't realize that. When we studied before when King Solomon, I'm sorry, I'm looking at that and saying King Solomon, when the one brother wanted to marry, yes, when King Solomon became king, the one brother wanted to marry the one daughter or the one woman that had taken care of King David. And King Solomon said, we're not having this. You cannot marry. That is a threat against the throne. I don't know if you remember that from last week, but I researched it a little bit more. And that's why, whether it's a wife or a concubine, it can get you closer to the throne by marrying one of the widows or concubines of the previous king. So that is why King Solomon wanted to kill his brother, because he's seen it as a direct plot to strategy to get to the kingship. We can read that in 1 King 2:22 through 25. King Solomon answered his mother. This is when his mother went to King Solomon and was asking on her son's behalf to marry this woman. Why do you request Abishag, the Shunammite, for Adijah? You might as well request the kingdom for him. After all, he is my older brother. So you see, after I started thinking about that a little bit deeper, I had to find out, well, why was she such a threat if he married the concubine? Well, when you dig into their culture and their laws back then, I don't know if it was an actual law, but the way that they practiced their culture, that was known that if you married the king's widow or concubine, that was just a step closer to the throne.
You would think at one point one of the kings would have changed that, to like avoid issues. Like, it's so funny, like even like the goofy rules like in Michigan from 100 years ago that you can't sit in the middle of the road reading a newspaper. Like, who came up with these laws and yet like never changed it? Like, it's so goofy. And like that one, like how silly. You wonder if the person who put it in order, like put it in place, was trying to trying to take the throne, and then that's why it got pushed through. But then how come he could have just changed it and then not killed everybody?
And I don't know if it was an exact law,
right?
But it was a cultural,
like a rule
thing. It was like a known rule in the kingdoms.
So weird.
And that's why a lot of times when you read about them, they're so protective over those concubines after they're killed. And I often wondered about that. And in other stories, you see them just throwing them out to the land, like, you're done here, it's over with. But that's if somebody is in place. So if somebody is not in place in the throne, it can be a threat. So,
well, and I wonder too now if King David, if that's why he was so adamant to get Patel or whatever back.
Yes.
Because she was married off again, and he's just trying to control, like, bring everything back.
Yes. Yes. Yep. So he went on to kill his brother for requesting, because he's seen it as a threat, as we've seen. And Amshon was a servant to King David. She took care of him in his later years. You can read that in 1 Kings 1-4, where he had some type of something wrong with him as he was passing, that he couldn't get warm. So they brought her in as a virgin, and she was to lay next to King David and keep him warm, keep her body temperature next to him to keep him warm. So it wasn't known whether they had actual sexual relationships on that, but you can assume that they may have. So she was still seen as one of the possible concubines to get in order to get closer to the throne. So that's what happened with her. And Absalom, what he goes and does, King David goes out on a another mission, and he's gone for a while. So Absalom, he's gonna sleep with the 10 concubines that in broad daylight. This is before he died, obviously. King David left 10 concubines back at the palace to take care of the palace. So Absalom decides that he's going to sleep with these 10 concubines in broad daylight and for all of Israel to see. And we can read that in second Samuel 16. We're still in chapter 16, 21 and 22. So if you go there in 21 and 22, he tells, after they had gone, the two climbed out of the well. This is, they went down into a well to hide. And they said to him, set out and cross the river. Pell was advised such and such against you. So David and all the people with him set out and crossed the Jordan. By daybreak, no one was left who had not crossed the Jordan. When Anthopol saw that his advice had not been followed, he saddled his donkey and set out for his house. He put his house in order and then hanged himself. I don't know why I had that in there. But anyway, this is what happened. I must have the wrong verse.
I think you're looking at chapter 16, verse like 20.
Yeah. Where was I at? 17. Yeah, I was in 17. Sorry about that. Thank you, Kaylee, for keeping me straight. Always keeping me straight. So Anthopol answered, sleep with your father's concubine, whom he left to take care of the palace. Then all Israel will hear that you have made your obnoxious to your father, and the hands of everyone with you will be resolute. So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and he slept with his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Now, what I want to bring up in this, and why I'm bringing this up, is you remember when the prophet had told David that in your house, you're going to have all this calamity and you're going to have all of this stuff happen. You did it in the dark, but I'm going to have this all in the light. And here it is, Absalom sleeping with those 10 concubines on the roof of Israel for all of Israel to see. So the concubines of the king mattered. It was a big deal. And Rizpah was the concubine of King Saul. She could be a possible avenue to the throne in this constant battle for the throne. So we're going to turn to 2 Samuel 21 now, and we're going to read 1 through 6. Kaylee, if you could read that for me, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. 2 Samuel 21.
1 through 6.
During the reign of David, there was a famine for 3 successive years. So David sought the face of the Lord. The Lord said, it is on account of Saul and his blood-stained house. It is because he put the Gibeonites to death. The king summoned the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not part of Israel, but were survivors of the Amorites. The Israelites had sworn to spare them. But Saul, in his zeal for Israel and Judah, had tried to annihilate them.
Yep.
David asked the Gibeonites, what shall I do for you? How shall I make atonement so that you will bless the Lord's inheritance? The Gibeonites answered him, we have no right to demand silver or gold from Saul or his family, nor do we have the right to put anyone in Israel to death. What do you want me to do for you? David asked. They answered the king, as for the man who destroyed us and plotted against us, so that we have been decimated and have no place anywhere in Israel. let 7 of his male descendants be given to us to be killed, and their bodies exposed before the Lord at Gibeah of Saul, the Lord's chosen one. So the king said,
Okay, stop there for a minute. Okay, so this is now these Gibeonites are demanding 7 of King Saul's grandsons for retribution for them being attacked and their land being destroyed. So they are demanding from King David these 7 men of Saul's. They're wanting to wipe out the rest of King Saul's descendants. So go ahead and finish 7.
So the king said, I will give them to you. The king spared.
But let me get it.
You missed the cue.
Mephibosheth,
Son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, because of the oath before the Lord between David and Jonathan, son of Saul. But the king took Armani and that one.
Yep. By Mephibosheth. Okay, stop there. So now, by the first by Mephibosheth, we know is the disabled son that went against this. This second Mephibosheth is one of the grandsons of King Saul. This is a second Mephibosheth. That's why we had to go through the first one to understand that there's 2 of them. The disabled one, that was Jonathan's son, and now we have Mephibosheth, which is the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, which is King Saul's grandson. So go ahead and finish 8.
The 2 sons of Aar's daughter Rizpah, whom she had borne to Saul, together with the 5 sons of Saul's daughter Merab, who she had borne to Adriel, son of Barzillai, the Melahorite.
Okay, stop there. So they're taking Rizpah's, the concubine of King Saul, 2 sons, and they're taking 5 sons of King Saul's daughter Merab. Now Merab was Michal's sister, if you remember in the Michal story. Merab had been married off and she had these 5 children. So now they're taking those 5 children of Merab, Michal's sister, and they're taking Rizpah's 2 sons. And I'll continue. He handed them over to the Gibeonites, who killed them and exposed their bodies on the hill before the Lord. So they killed them, they hung them up. These 7 boys, grandsons of King Saul. They probably weren't boys, they were men at this time. All 7 of them fell together. They were put to death during the first days of the harvest, just as the barley harvest was beginning. Rizpah, the daughter of Riah, took sackcloth and spread it out for herself on a rock. So she's there witnessing her 2 sons killed because of this restitution to the Gibeonites. From the beginning of the harvest till the rain poured down from the heavens on the bodies, she did not let the birds touch them by day or the wild animals by night. She camped out. So she stood on the hill watching them kill her 2 sons. And then she stayed by their bodies, keeping the birds away and keeping the wild animals away night after night after night, the whole time through the harvest until the rain came. And they left her there doing it. This battle was going on, this constant cannot resolve our issues. You killed this one, I'm going to kill that one. You did this, I'm going to do that. This constant battle between the Israelites and the Philistines, the Gibeonites, and all of the Ammonites, and all of those that were around in that area. When David was told that his daughter Rizpah, Saul's concubine, had done what she had done, he went and took the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan from the cities of Jabesh. He started thinking about it. Oh my gosh, what are we doing here? They had stolen their bodies from the public square at Bethshan, where the Philistines had hung them and hung them after they struck Saul down in Gilboa. David brought the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan from there, and the bones of those who had been killed and exposed were gathered up. So he decides, you know what? I am so wrong. This is so wrong. What is going on? These battles continuing, these deaths, and these bodies of the people are not being buried properly. This cannot go on. No wonder God is sending famine and sending all this because of the bloodshed that's going on. So King David decides, I've got to get these bones. I've got to do a proper burial. We cannot let this happen. Rizpah is the one who made them understand through her diligence and her obedience, and how she just could not stand there and watch this happen and do nothing about it. Because of her consistency and her directness and her obedience and love for her sons, the nation, the king, realized that they had done wrong, that they were wrong in what they did, that people are entitled to a proper burial and entitled to have the bodies of their people back.
Well, back then too, there was a huge, like ceremonial aspect of burial and death, and a set time for mourning for after, like it was a big, not that, it's not emphasized nowadays, but it was, a process of a ceremony of like the oils and the, like there was a whole thing like for it. So like to not have a proper burial, I think they would have, thoughts of like, like the like a unsteady soul, if they didn't receive their proper burial and stuff.
Yes, exactly right, Kaylee, that they were the Jewish people stay with the body between the death and the burial. Mm-hmm. So when that is their cultural belief, that is what they do. I highly respect what they do. When I learned about what they do from my Jewish friend, and they sit with the body until the body is buried. They do not leave the body.
And they cover them with certain oils, like in place of like our nowadays embalming aspects. They use oils and stuff to preserve the body. Like it's important within a certain amount of time after the body is dead that the next ritual or the word left my head, but like a ritual, like it's the time frame of when the stuff needs to take place.
Yes, and she had the right to bury her son within 24 hours. And that did not happen. She had the right to have a proper burial. She had the right to be able to wash the bodies, to sit with the bodies, to bury the bodies. She had all of those rights that were taken away from her because of this war. So she stood against the war by doing what she did, by keeping the birds away and the wild animals away. She made the people of Israel understand that this was not okay, that this was completely against, regardless of the war going on and the battles going on, what you're doing is killing all of these soldiers, and the mothers and the families are not able to do proper burials. And she stuck out because these were the grandsons of Saul, and the Gibeonites had wanted that for restitution. So it began to make them understand there was more to it than just killing the Saul's grandson, that there was more pain and sorrow going on in the land than just get your restitution and be done. So we can continue reading in 21 and start at 15. So, well, we'll finish 14. They buried the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan in the tomb of Saul's father Kish at Zelah and Benjamin, and did everything the king commanded. After that, God answered prayer in behalf of the land. See, God had stopped answering prayers. God had stopped listening to anything going on in the land, and sent the famine and sent the things that are going on to make them people start to realize what they're doing to the land with their actions. So in 15, we'll start. Once again, there was a battle between the Philistines. Once again, the Philistines, they just will not stop in Israel. David went down with his men to fight against the Philistines, and he became exhausted. I'll skip over some of this. Then David's men swore to him, saying, never again will you go out with us to battle, so the lamp of Israel will not be extinguished. Now they're worried about David getting killed at the battle. And in the course of time, there was another battle with the Philistines at Gob. At that time, Shebachai, the Hushite, killed Saph, one of the descendants of Rabbas. And one after another, they just keep killing one after another. They continued to do these battles. In another battle with the Philistines at Gab, Ethan, son of Jar, continues on. And still another battle which took place at Gab. There was a huge man with 6 fingers in each hand on his toes. This battling just keeps continuing. These 4 were descendants of Raphi, and they fell at the hands of David and his men. So David, he starts singing his song. He starts going into this praise. He's understanding now that this has to end. These wars between the Philistines and the Israelites and all the other Ammonites and things that are in that area has got to stop. So we go on to David's last words in chapter 23. These are the last words of David, the inspired utterance of David, son of Jesse, the utterance of the man exalted by the Most High, the man anointed by the God of Jacob, the hero of Israel's song. The Spirit of the Lord spoke through me. His word was on my tongue. The God of Israel spoke. The rock of Israel said to me, when one rules over people in righteousness, when he rules in the fear of God, he is like the light of morning at sunrise, on a cloudless morning, like the brightness after rain that brings grass from the earth. If my house were not right with God, surely he would not have made with me an everlasting covenant, arranged and secured in every part. Surely he would not bring to fruition my salvation and grant me my every desire. But evil men are all to be cast aside like thorns, which are not gathered with the hand. Whoever touches thorns uses a tool of iron or the shaft of a spear. They are burned up where they lie. David is cleaning up his life here. He's trying to say that I understand that I need to clean up my house. I need to clean up the land. I am responsible for my life and my salvation. And that is what we are, responsible for our life, our salvation, what we're doing, what we're not doing. We can't blame it on the battles and the things that are going on around us. We have to stand firm in what God is telling us to do. We have to stand firm in the character of God as we move through life. And that's what King David did as he went through life. Yes, did King David make mistakes? Yes, he did. But he also had times of conviction and times that he repented and turned from those things. he also had people like Rizpah that was so strong in her faith and her understanding of what needed to take place for her sons and the people in the nation, that he had to see and be and know that what he was doing or what the land was doing was incorrect. And he also realized that he had to clean up his own house before he could expect that the land was going to be cleaned up. He couldn't expect everyone else to do the things that were right in the sight of God if you had a king that was not doing what he needed to do. So he realized that he had to set that example in order to be able to change the land. And Rizpah, she set that example for the other people in the land to see that we have to stand firm in order to make that change. We can't expect others to make the change if we're sitting back in the back pews, in the back 40, in the back of anything, and not coming forth and bringing forth the things of God that need to be brought forth. We're not making change by sitting in the back fields and waiting for someone else to step forward or someone else to do the work. We have to realize that we are responsible in our own life, in our own convictions, in order to do what is right in God's eyes and with God's character. And David tried that. He tried in the many different ways that we had examples of today. And I know the reading was long today, but we had to understand what David was going through and what he was facing, but yet his heart was still for God. That's why God said, David has the heart for me, because no matter what, he continued to seek out God's favor. He continued to recognize what he wasn't doing right. He might have still messed up. I'm not saying he didn't, but once he realized what he did, he changed what he was doing. He changed his actions. He changed his mindset. He changed his heart set. So God said, that is a man, David is a man after my own heart, because he was willing to see the difference between what he was doing and what he should be doing. He was willing to be that example to show what is right and wrong in the kingdom. He was willing to listen to Rizpah, who was just a mother. She was Saul's concubine, but at that point, she was just a mother. She wasn't any king's concubine or ex-concubine. She wasn't in the land respected as someone to completely look up to. She was a mother at that time, standing at that hill, looking at her sons being slaughtered. She was standing there being exposed to it without anything that she could do. She couldn't stop it. She couldn't help it. She couldn't do anything to prevent it. This was going to happen in her eyes as she stood on the hill. But what she could do was stand firm in her belief and her understanding of what God wanted from her. And she had a mission to do. She had something to do that God needed her to do. And she did it. And she made a change in the land. Now, did that change last? No, the Philistines kept attacking. They kept coming. They kept pushing. They kept doing. But she stood firm. And the famine, the 3-year famine, stopped with the rest of her community. And now they were going through all of this. But she stepped up and she became a light for that nation. She became the example for that nation of change can happen by standing firm. She ended up getting the bodies, as we know, and being able to bury the bodies so that she could go through her grief process. But the land had to also go through their grief process. There is a process that land and individuals need to go through in order to come back to God. And I just pray that our land turns around and starts going back to God more. And we need to pray for the believers and the people that are standing firm on their beliefs every single day and pray for each other's as brothers and sisters, that we're standing firm, whatever that is, whatever our mission, whatever we're supposed to be doing, that we're standing firm like Rizpah without wavering. I can't imagine being a mother like Mary with Jesus, watching our sons slaughtered and killed, and then be able to sit there and try to keep birds and animals from mangling the body. I can't imagine her heart at that time. I can't imagine that I can imagine that she would be wanting to give up completely and just fall on the face of the ground and just be in deep, deep sorrow. But she didn't. She beat the birds off. She beat the wild animals off night after night through the entire harvest. And if anybody has ever harvested in a field, it doesn't happen in just one day.
No.
It went on for a month. It went on for a while. I don't know the exact time frame, but I know in a harvest it goes on for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And she beat those animals off and those birds off. So that is our Rizpah story today. Her strength, her determination, her resilience, and her faith in God. And I give her a lot of credit and respect for what she did, because most of us in that situation wouldn't even know what to do, but she knew what to do. Just like the wise woman of Abel standing on the wall. She decided in a moment that, okay, we need to take the head of Sheba and we need to throw it over to Job. In a moment, us as women and men standing firm with God, in a moment, with our discernment and our faith in God, can know what we need to do in the moment, whether we need to stand strong or not. Go ahead, Kaylee.
So I was thinking, right, when you were talking about how long like the harvest is, because Mary, right, went to her cousin's house when she, first got pregnant. And then at the end of the harvest, she was 6 months when she returned back home, right?
Yep.
So I went to Google because I was thinking, well, it might be a different harvest or, something. But no, so it says Rizpah guarded the bodies of her executed sons for approximately 6 months from the beginning of the harvest until the rain fell. Says which is roughly usually from April to October is the harvest.
I knew it was a while. I forgot to look up that fact, but I knew it was more than just a little bit. So she slept by those bodies a long time.
And it says David eventually took down the bodies and buried them in the family grave at Zelah.
Yep.
But yeah, their harvest time was 6 months. Well, ours is quicker, right? Because we have motorized vehicles and we have, things. But yeah, 6 months, just like when Mary went to go help with the harvest.
Yeah, that excellent point, Kaylee. Appreciate you bringing it up. Yeah, it wasn't just a week.
And then that's like 6 months of watching like complete deterioration. Like even though you're protecting the body, like that's sad in its own. Like having to watch that and see that each day, and
Yeah, because they wouldn't have just stayed hanging there. They would have eventually dropped, and then she would have been fighting over them on the ground. Yeah, my heart goes out to her. I can't imagine that, to literally be watching your son, that way deteriorate would be awful. But she seen something more than that. She's seen something more than herself and her sorrow that needed to be fixed in the land. So she was, even though there's just a little bit on her, it really says a lot about her faith and her standing strong. So that is our study on Rizpah, and we appreciate you being here. We'll be going to an outreach this weekend and be connecting with everyone there, and I can't wait to see everybody. I praise God for it. And so I hope this study touched you in a way that it was meant. We have our next study will be on Queen of Sheba, and we'll see you next Tuesday at 9:00 a.m. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Kaylee, for your input and being here with your mama. And we'll see you next week. We'll see you this weekend.
Yep.
Bye-bye.